Oh, hello, everybody. Jason, I'm New Days Revolution Cave. It is a Thursday night bowling league with Finley, and I'm 2 weeks in, and I'm 2 weeks awful, awful, playing terribly, and yeah, it's very frustrating. I don't know if any of you guys are golfers or softball players or men's pickup league basketball players or bowlers or whatever. But do you ever get to a point where you're just so, like, even at, 2 years away from 50 and bowling in, small town leagues with a child, that mean nothing, that don't mean anything athletically. It means something family, personally, and then I take it so poorly. If I'm doing poorly, my whole night is ruined. It's so frustrating that I've always been that way, by the way. I've always been, you know, super down on myself when I don't do well. And I've never played any other sports really. So, I don't care about any other performance sports, performance athletics. But yeah, this is the second week, and I'm playing like garbage, and I come home in a bad mood, and it's like, well, back to the drawing board, for the bazillionth time since you were 3 years old. Bugs me. So yeah, do any of you guys play something and then just hate yourself when you do poorly, and like you gotta try to get some sleep and hope tomorrow you're in a better mood because it just ruins your night, even though it means nothing? Yeah, that's me. That's me. All right, so, but to get out of that, we're going to talk about a Hey Do You Remember? A Hey Do You Remember, where we go back in time and we talk about all those things that we experienced as kids in the 80s, things that we will never experience again, and things that kids of today will never experience again. There will never be a show on YouTube 30 years from now where a kid says, "Hey, do you remember when you got your PS5?" It's not going to be a thing. "Hey, do you remember when you upgraded your iPhone?" It's not going to exist. It's not going to exist. But "Hey, do you remember when you got your first Atari?" That exists. That exists. And that's what we're talking about tonight. Hey, do you remember your first Atari? Why am I talking about Atari again? We've talked about this in the past. Well, because I've decided I had 2 bins of Atari games. I stuffed about 20 games into the actual Atari 2600 box that's down here, that has the console and the hookups and the controllers. I stuffed about 20 games in there. You can't see it. And then I put, I don't know, 10 or 11 or 15 or 20 games in the in like this little wicker basket that I have under the coffee table down here. And I was playing Atari for a little while. I was playing River Raid and Pac-Man and games like that. And then I just decided, you know what? I'm going to sell the games. So I put 31 Atari games up on eBay, and they are currently up there right now. 31 Atari games at the New 80s Revolution's eBay page. Why? Well, because I'm never going to play them. I'm never going to play them. I don't display them. I don't collect them. I just have them. So I put 31 games on eBay, and I saved about 15. I saved River Raid, I saved Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, E.T., Asteroid, Space Invaders, Centipede, games like that. I saved those just in case I hook up the Atari and play again, because I'm probably never going to play Riddle of the Sphinx or the Sphinx. Probably never going to play that. Probably never going to play Night Driver. Probably never going to play Carnival. So I just listed them on eBay, and I'll get $50 or $60 for 31 games, and I'll put that towards the trip to Universal Studios. But it made me think, It made me think, hey, I remember my first Atari. Do you remember your first Atari? Because your first Atari was your first video game system, right? Okay, you might have had Coleco, you might have had the Intellivision, your dad might have been a major computer nerd, and you might have had like a computer gaming system. But for, the majority of us, the Atari 2600 was our first at-home video game system. And by the time we'd gotten the Atari 2600, many of us were already familiar with video games through the arcade. And so we knew what these things were. I'm willing to bet that not a lot of us got an Atari randomly without ever having played a video game in our lives, without ever having experienced a video game. But the Atari was, revolutionary, obviously, and it brought us kind of to a whole new level of like anticipation and excitement, of when we were going to be able to play, whether it was after school, whether it was before school, whether it was on weekends, whatever it was. It was something extremely exciting because it was something we had never experienced before. And that's the whole point of this channel. That's the whole point of the recollection, the reminiscing. This is all stuff that we never did before, right? Again, we're not going to see YouTube shows on, I remember my iPhone 15 because it was so much better than my iPhone 13. That's never going to happen. My Xbox X was better than my Xbox One. Oh, I remember when I upgraded. That's never going to happen, right? So the Atari. I remember getting my first Atari at 6 years old, folks. 6 years old, I went to Boston to have eye surgery. Did I say 6 months old? I'm sorry, 6 years old. I went to Boston to have eye surgery at 6 years old. And when I came home, my grandparents picked us up from the airport, and they had the Atari Junior, I believe. That can't be right, can it? But I remember the Atari Junior box. Was the Atari Junior out in 82? That's what I would have been 6. I don't think so. Maybe the Atari Junior was another time. But they met us at the airport with an Atari. And I was like, over the moon about it. And we got it home, and I remember playing. So I remember prior to that, and this is very, very cloudy, fuzzy memories because I'm 6 years old, and they're not that crystal clear. But my cousins had an Atari. And back in the day, you went to visit people. You went to visit family. That might be another show. I hate you remember visiting family members as a kid, but we would go to my aunt and uncle's house. My parents and my aunt and uncle would just do whatever they did in the kitchen. It was always in the kitchen. And me and my cousins would sit around, and I would always want to play Atari, and I would always want to play Pac-Man. And so the cousins who were like, 4 or 5 years older, they're treating a little 6-year-old, little 7-year-old like, come on, we've been playing this Atari for a year. You want to play Atari? Okay. Play Atari. We're going to go smoke weed up in our bedrooms. Go ahead and play Atari. And I was just like, so happy playing the Atari. And then I got it. And I remember the game I remember having most vividly was bowling, of course. I had bowling. And I know we had Pac-Man, and I know we all had Combat. I remember having E.T. pretty early in life, and having no idea what to do. There's a game called Amarig, or that's all I can say is I don't know, Amarig. I'll look it up and throw a picture in, but it was such a cool game where you had to it was almost like Burger Time, where you had to it was like a Burger Time Donkey Kong, I don't know. I just remember having that game. I remember my mom, absolutely loving the Super Breakout game, and we would, she'd play with the paddles, and I just remember it sitting on the console TV, something like that, just sitting on top of the console TV. And we would sit on the floor like I'm doing now, right in front of the TV, and just play Atari. Not for 16 hours straight, though. For, I don't know, a half hour, an hour. I've told this story before. I remember having the Atari, and it was hooked up in our living room, again, on the console TV. And they were doing construction on our street. And we would get weird feedback through our TV while we were playing Atari. We were getting almost the CB radios of these work trucks. We were picking up the noise from these trucks through our television, through our Atari. And it blew all of our minds. Aliens were approaching, the end of the world was coming, but it was the interference from the reception. I don't know. We were getting the CB radio, if that's what they have, whatever they had in their trucks. It was coming through our TV, and it was just so weird and bizarre, and I was terrified of it. Because I think I'd just seen Poltergeist, and my fear of televisions was through the roof. I had, Atari pretty late in life. I didn't get a Nintendo until like 86, 87. I want to say maybe even 87, maybe even 88. I didn't get a Nintendo until. And so I was playing Atari a lot. For some reason, I knew how to play Atari football, which today, if I played it, I have no idea what to do. Atari football was fine. Pac-Man I loved, even though everybody else hates it. Pitfall was fun. Missile Command was fun. River Raid was great. Super Breakout was great. And then you would just get this overwhelmingly massive amount of bad games where you had no idea what to do. Again, got games like this weird, a Magic company that put out a bunch of games that were like super cheap, and you could buy them at your drugstores for $5.99. The whole video game crash thing. They were all weird space games, and nobody knew what to do with them. You just didn't know what to do. And these are the games that your aunt would buy you for Christmas, and you just had no idea what to do with them, and you still don't know what to do with them. They're just a couple of lights on a black screen, a couple of noises, choo choo choo. You have no idea what to do. But again, there were some gems, again, like River Raid. I still think Pac-Man's fine. I know that everybody hated it. I don't know why. I mean, it didn't look like the arcade game, but it was Pac-Man. What else do you want? Games like Pitfall that you never knew how to end. Defender was fun. Asteroids was fun. Missile Command I loved. Like I said, it was very frustrating. I never knew how to play Yar's Revenge until I seen an actual playthrough video on YouTube of how to play Yar's Revenge. I did have the Atari. I did have the big one, but I also had an Atari Junior at one point. And what's that other game that Jungle Hunt. Jungle Hunt was so fun. I loved Jungle Hunt. I thought the graphics on Jungle Hunt were just great. Night Driver I would play. Pole Position, games like that. And it was just a lot of innocent video game fun. And like I said, I still have one. I still have my Atari, but I am selling 31 Atari games, keeping about 15. And I don't know, I may never play Atari again. The Atari commercials are so good and so 80s. I don't remember them then, but I've sure watched a ton of them now through eBay. I've sure watched a ton of them now through YouTube, and I love them. They're almost as good as the McDonald's, the 80s McDonald's commercials. 80s Atari commercials are so good and so wholesome and so nostalgic. I love them. But, we move on. And no, I don't love the Atari enough to hook it up and play it now. It just doesn't capture my attention. I don't, but I have it. I will soon have 31 less games, but I have the Atari. And I have the memories of the Atari on the little 13-inch black and white TV in my room. Those were the best times, and those cannot be duplicated. They're gone forever. Anyway, what are your memories of the Atari 2600? Put them below, and we will see you all next time. Good night now.